This is Castle 1. Race officer speaking.
Lane line is on boundary up ahead, 35 seconds out.
A bit lower and faster here.
That's a good one, Jimmy.
Still gaining on the lane line there.
We're looking at 10.5, 42. Matching him on the boundary, yeah, copy.
Hi podcast listeners, welcome along, and once again we've got a fascinating podcast for you this month. A sit-down interview with a man that must rank as one of the nicest guys in sailing. Not only that, it turns out he's a great storyteller. I spent almost the entire chat with this month's guest with a massive grin on my face. It's another fascinating listen. We did this month's interview just before I jumped on a plane and took off for a few weeks racing, picking up the super yacht circuit pretty much where I left it 2 years ago as the pandemic began to take hold. It'll be so good to get back to racing in the reliable trade winds and blue waters of the Caribbean. And I do hope wherever you're listening from, you're finding some time to get out there on the water. Before we get going, a massive thanks to all of you who got in touch after Goodies podcast last month. We do love to hear from you, and thanks too to all of you that jumped on to buymeacoffee.com. It makes a big difference, and once again, some of you have been very generous. So for that, a massive thank you. If you're enjoying listening to the podcast and want to support it, then it's all very simple. Go to buymeacoffee.com/sailing podcast. It's super quick, super easy, and it's greatly appreciated. Right, so what about this month's guest? Well, if you're not too familiar with professional sailboat racing, this man's name may be new to you. But that does not mean Jason Carrington isn't an important part of the jigsaw that makes up our diverse and varied sport. He's British, he lives on the south coast and has an enviable offshore sailing CV that includes 4 Whitbred and Volvo campaigns. But throughout that time, Jason was also developing into one of the sport's most talented boat builders. From a young age, he apprenticed at the highly respected Green Marine Boatyard under the watchful eye of the innovative Bill Green, learning his trade in a yard responsible for some of the most groundbreaking race boats of their day. With the financial demise of Green and with the support of his long-term friend and Whitbred skipper Lawrie Smith, Carrington established his own yard. And for the past 5 years, Carrington boats have been at the forefront of Grand Prix boat building, from the AC-75s of the America's Cup to the Imoca 60s of the Vendée Globe. I hope you enjoy the time I spent with Jason Carrington.
Just when I was finished my apprenticeship, he had a delivery to do around Cape Horn, and I thought, oh, that's for me. Jason, come to Stockholm. I've got the money. We're going to do the round the world race, and I want you to join me. Come on! We never had a weak helmsman. We just were, we were on fire the whole time.
Jason, thanks for joining us on the podcast. It's good to have you along.
Well, thanks for having me.
It's absolutely our pleasure. We're here at Carrington Boats, based at the Marine Park in Hythe, near Southampton. Tell our listeners, Jason, what goes on here? What do you get up to?
Well, we've not been here that long, to be honest. We've been here. We started in 2017, and our first boat. We build custom race boats, and our first boat was a little Fast 40 Rahn 7 for Nicholas Zenstrom. And since then, we've built probably another 5 or 6 race boats. So Alex's Imoca boat, Ben's Cup boats, another Imoca boat for Kevin Escoffier for PRB. And now we're doing a kind of little secret project and a boat for Lawrie Smith, who's my business partner, a motorboat for him. So, but it's all of it's custom race boats, really, with a little powerboat thrown in. Most of what we do is all quite confidential. So, it's for high-end races, the races you're very familiar with. So we have to be pretty discreet about what we're doing. So we do keep the doors firmly shut, apart from when we get to get the boats in and out. But we really do the composite box. So we start from the drawing. Sometimes we build the mould, sometimes we buy the mould in, and then we lay the hulls up, lay the decks up, build all the structure, assemble the boats. Quite often we paint them as well. We rarely completely finish them. I think Nicholas's boat Nicholas's boat left here and we went sailing 2 days later. but most of the boats go off to the teams to be commissioned, if you like, put together. So really, it's the composite here. Yeah.
Got such a lot to talk about, Jason. Before we get going on the boat build side, I'd really like our listeners to know more about you as a sailor. And as we'll hear, you boast a very accomplished offshore career. I mean, was that inevitable, growing up here on the south coast of England in a seafaring family?
Yeah, I guess so. I think my dad was a boat builder and a sailor, and my mum was very into her sailing as well. And actually, she had a boat trip called the Water Rat on Lymington River. She was the first woman in the UK actually to hold a commercial license. So I sort of grew up with all that. And then my dad was godfather to Claire Francis' son, Thomas. So I was, at a young age, I was watching Claire doing the Round the World race and the transatlantic races. And I got kind of hooked on it and thought, God, I'd love to do that. So, and we often went sailing with Claire. We went, after the Round the World race, we went cruising around Brittany and with her husband, Jacko, as well. So it was a very, it was a lovely childhood. And I just saw it going on and thought, gosh, this is fantastic. So I think I was pretty hooked early on, for sure. Yeah.
I remember when we interviewed Jimmy Spittle, he told us, he went to school on a boat. He lived on an island and, had to get to the mainland on a boat. And I'm imagining your life always pootling around in the river.
No, absolutely, yeah. My mum and dad had a house. They lived on a houseboat when I was born. So we had, I think I only spent a few days on the houseboat because my sister, I think she'd almost drowned 3 or 4 times rolling off the back of the house. It was an old MTV boat. Which was moored up right at the end of the river. But I think the pram was sat on, the brake came off and it went into the river one time. The boat flooded. There were always sort of incidents. So when I arrived, I think they thought it was time to move. So then my mum and dad bought a little house in Nelson Place, which is one of the oldest streets in Lymington. And my dad's boatyard was just around the corner. So yeah, for me and my sister growing up, it was wonderful. We literally get up, we walked to the quay, walked to dad's yard. We had dinghies and little motorboats with outboards, and my dad was into offshore powerboat racing as well as sailing. So it was brilliant. Yeah, we had a great time.
Fantastic. Now, you talk about your dad. He was in the Lymington lifeboat. And as we've said, Lymington is just inside the Solent, almost opposite the Needles of the Isle of Wight. And my understanding is that as soon as you could, you joined him. Tell us about that, Jason.
Well, the lifeboat, you mean? Yeah, I guess I followed in his footsteps. He was pretty much with the founding guys in Lymington of setting up the lifeboat, if you like. I think the RNLI's been around for a long time, but in terms of having the Lymington lifeboat, he was certainly one of the first ones there. So again, as a kid, it's so exciting. So I was so into that, and I think I used to, at school, my kids are doing it now, but at school I used to, after the weekend, we had to write about what we did, and I'd always write about, I've been out on the lifeboat rescuing people. It was all complete lies, but I couldn't help it. I was so excited by it. So I guess, again, yeah, I followed him, and then when the chance arose to be able to join the crew, I did. And I loved it. Again, it was fantastic. Unfortunately, my dad had gone abroad at that stage, so we weren't there at the same time. We could have been just about, but we weren't. But I still knew a lot of the guys there, for sure. Yeah.
I think you grew up pretty quickly on the lifeboat.
Yeah, you do, yeah. Yeah.
What about school then? You're having a great time as a youngster, on the water. What were your hopes job-wise?
I don't think I knew really. I was so into boats and the sea. I just guess I knew it would be something to do with that, but I hadn't really thought of boat building particularly. My dad was a boat builder, and then after that he started to run big boats. I think he was the first charter boat to be in Turkey actually. So he was very early into that scene in the sort of, I guess, the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s. So I think at that point, I kind of, whatever my dad did, I think I felt I wanted to do the same. So I probably thought, I'll do that. I'll go and run boats. But my mum was a bit more, my mum and dad had split up. I guess I was 15 when that happened. And my mum was a bit more structured. My dad was away. And I think my mum felt, no, you need a bit of grounding. You need to do something that's, you need a trade or something. And I wasn't particularly academic at school. So university wasn't really something I'd thought about or wanted to do. So I ended up doing a year's full-time boat building course in Southampton. And I thought I'll do that and then I'll go and run all these boats and be sailing or whatever. I did that year, and then my mum was like, well, you've done it, come on, why don't you do an apprenticeship? So she really sort of pushed me along, really. And then I went and got on my bike. So my mum knew Bill Green. She knew the local people, I suppose. I didn't really know Bill, but I got on my bike, cycled round, met Bill, and said, I want to do an apprenticeship. And Bill said, we don't want to give you an apprenticeship. I'll give you a job. We don't want, he wasn't really into that thing. But I said, no, it has to be an apprenticeship. So good on him. They employed, I think I was the first employee. Everyone else was subcontractor at that time at Green Marine. I was the 6th person through the door, pretty much the first employee and certainly the first apprentice. And then I did my 4 years at Green Marine, and Bill and Ian, Bill's business partner, Ian King, were really good to me, and that they knew I was into my sailing, and they let me go and do that. So I sailed a lot at the same time as doing my apprenticeship. So I was very fortunate there, and was seeing all these cool boats being built, and I got pretty interested in it and thought, this is cool. And I was starting to meet people that I follow on with later on in life. Magnus Olsen was there building interim justitia, for example. So that's when I met Magnus. At the time I lived with the girlfriend at the time, we rented this wonderful old house, the top of Lymington. We had the top floor, and I used to see I had a little mini clubman. We used to drive into work and used to see Magnus sort of running down the road, and we'd pick him up and take him to work. And it was a good time.
We're going to talk a bit more later about Bill Green and boat building. But I'm curious about the professional sailing. I mean, did you ever think, actually, I can make a living from this, or was it always in tandem with the boat building?
I think as soon as I was still desperate to do the sailing, and I'd done a lot of sailing with Claire Francis, even with my parents, and then after that too, she had a cruising boat. I went cruising with her. When pretty much the day I finished my apprenticeship, I had a plan to go sailing. I wanted to go sailing. And there was a chap, a great mate of Bill Green's, a chap called Edgar Kookaburra. Not many people know the name Edgar Kookaburra, but actually he's still alive, and he's an absolute legend in the sailing world, really. He was Connie, I can't say Connie's second name, but the flyer, Connie van Dudder. Edgar was basically his sailing master. And I met Edgar at Green Marine. He was building his own boat and wanting to go off and sail around the world with his girlfriend. And just when I was finished my apprenticeship, he had a delivery to do from Holland to Chile, round Cape Horn. And I thought, oh, that's for me. So I started badgering Edgar. And Bill was great and said, come on, Edgar, take Jason. And so I literally, the day I finished my apprenticeship, I left. I went to Holland to Huisman shipyard, met Edgar. The boat was a 62-foot sloop, beautiful boat called Yonder, really good steel, solid boat. And we left there and did this delivery trip to Chile, round Cape Horn, the wrong way. And I remember it taking like 3 days to get around Cape Horn, horrendous weather, but it was a wonderful trip. And I'd done quite a bit of sailing already. And although I was the youngest on the boat, I was kind of looking after a watch, and I was looking after the boat. And if someone had to go up the rig, that was me. And I was loving it all, but I just felt, God, I love this, but I want to be racing, I wanted a bit more competitiveness. So after that trip, I was sure that I wanted to sail around the world, do the round the world race, yeah.
Well, and soon after that trip, I guess by your mid-20s, maybe by now, you'd picked up a spot on board Fortuna for your first Whitbred race. How did that come about?
Well, it wasn't straightforward. I guess before, in terms of professional sailing, I want to mention him because he was so good to me, and I was very fond of him. But Chris Law took me match racing, so that was my first sort of real, professional sailing. So I did that, and then the offshore sailing came really again through Green Marine and building interim justitia. I was badgering Magnus to take me on interim justitia because I'd actually, if I get it right, I'd finished my apprenticeship. I'd gone off with Edgar to do the trip to Chile, and I'd come back with no money, no job, and had to go back to Bill and said, "Can I have a job?" So Bill took me in, and I knew that they were building interim justitia for the round the world race, and I thought, "Oh, that's my plan. I'm going to get on that boat." So I went there, met Magnus, badgered Magnus for the job to try and get on the crew. And it was a tricky boat to get on. Obviously, I'd never done the round the world race, but also it had to be a European. Each member of the crew had to come from a different European country. Knut was there. Knut was the Norwegian guy, Knut Frostad. Rick Tomlinson was in line to be the English guy. So I didn't really know Rick at that time, but I was there. I saw Rick in the boatyard, and again, all the guys at Green Marine were so good to me. And I remember the foreman at the time, a chap called Alan Woodford, stopped Magnus. Stopped Magnus and said, "Magnus, you've got to take Jason. Stop saying you might take him." And he did. So so when the boat left, I went with Intram. We went to, the boat was in Southampton. We went for a sail. Bill came. We took the boat to Southampton, and then we did this trip to Stockholm. Or was it Stockholm? No, Gothenburg. Sorry, that was the first trip to Gothenburg, and I joined the boat as crew for. I wasn't signed up for the round the world race, but I was on the boat. And I couldn't believe it, It was like heaven. I was like, wow. I remember, I think my mum drove me up there to get on the boat. I got on the boat and off we went and sailed into Gothenburg and loved it. Had all the crew kit on. I thought, wow, this is good. And it went pretty well. And then I did the round Europe race as the bowman on the boat. Was great. I was always very fond of Magnus. I had a very close relationship with him, and he looked after me, and it just evolved from there. And then it came to the point where it was like, well, am I on the boat or not? I wanted to know. And Roger Nilsson was the skipper at the time, and he said to me, "Look, Jason, I can't commit to you for the whole race, but we're planning to take you from the second leg. But Rick's going to do the first leg, and Rick might end up doing the whole race." And I thought. And at the same, while all this was going on, I was also applying to other boats, including Grant Dalton, everyone. I was writing to everyone, Chris Dixon, Lawrie Smith, everyone. And I got an invite from Lawrie to go and do a test sail on Fortuna, which I think came about through Mike Slade, who was a great friend of Laurie's, and I'd done some sailing with Mike. So I went, and so I said to Roger, "No, I want to do the whole race. So I've got this invite. I'm going to go and try my luck with Lawrie." And by that time, I've become great mates with Rick. And we still joke about it now that he took my spot. But anyway, I came back and did the trial with Lawrie and got the nod to be the bowman on Fortuna. But it was difficult because I loved the boat Intram. I'd built it. I knew the people. I was so fond of Magnus. I felt like that was kind of my boat a little bit. I'm going to Fortuna, which really was. I don't think Lawrie would mind me saying it was a horror show, It was an old boat that had been lengthened and tried to be made competitive, and it didn't feel particularly right, but it was Lawrie Smith and it was British, and so that's the decision I made and went off with them. Yeah.
Describe, if you can, what that felt like. I mean, you're looking at the start line of that Whitbread. Grant Dalton won it, of course. Lawrie Smith was there. Chris Dixon, Dennis Connor was in there. French legend, Eric Taberlet. I mean, how daunting and exciting was that, getting a spot in that edition? Yeah,
it was incredibly daunting, and I was very anxious about it, And I'm the first to say I never did enough dinghy sailing. I'm not like you. I'm not a wonderful dinghy sailor. I would, in hindsight, I'd love to have been, but I wasn't. I never was that. I came quite late to it. I think I've got a reasonable feel for a boat, and I work hard, and I'm relatively tough, I suppose. And I got very. I think I was fair to say I got very good at being a bowman. But I did feel a bit vulnerable, and I knew that's what I was good at, and I wasn't an all-rounder. But in those days, you could kind of get away with that, I guess. But yeah, I definitely remember the start in Southampton and just feeling, quite nervous about the whole thing, I suppose. And there were these big, powerful characters, like Lawrie and Dave Powys, Paul Stanbridge. They were just, I was in awe of them, really. And it all felt a bit daunting. It was the early days for me. So there were some younger guys, but I was certainly one of the youngest. Yeah, so it felt... Guillermo Altadil was there. I've met some great friends from that project. Neil MacDonald, of course, I went on to sail a lot with afterwards. So it was. I don't regret the decision, even though it all went wrong very quickly for Fortuna. I don't regret the decision, but at the time it was tough.
As you say, it didn't go well, did it? We started in home waters in the Solent, and the fleet sailed into a storm in the Bay of Biscay. Describe for us what happened?
Well, I remember we started and the boat was terrible upwind. I remember that. I mean, a diabolical upwind. But actually it had so much sail area off the wind, it was actually pretty rapid. And I think probably the first morning we were approaching Ushant downwind and quite heavy, and the boat took off. We sailed past Grant in Fisher and Pike, and I thought, wow, this is not so bad. maybe we are okay. And we took off pretty impressively. But then very soon afterwards, I mean, it was probably only like day 2 or day 3, we broke the mizzenmast. So that was, pretty depressing. And I think even before the mizzenmast, the boom, everything was breaking. But let's say it was the mizzenmast first. We cleaned that up and we kept going. And actually, because it was still heavy air downwind, we were still pretty competitive as a sloop, if you like. We carried on, and then soon afterwards, we broke the mainmast. It's hard to believe what went on that trip. It was unbelievable. The boat was just, pulled together at the end, and I think every effort to try to make it competitive with that, and the reliability just wasn't there, and we hadn't done the sailing, and it all just came down around our ears, really, and it was very windy, and we had to. Then the news came that Fortuna were pulling out and they wouldn't do the race, and I just remember being, I was devastated. It was my whole dream, and it was like it was over. And I remember limping back into Hamburg in the pitch black, and journalists being there, and I just wanted to hide. It was awful. And then ironically, of course, Lawrie ends up joining in Justitior after the next leg, and I just thought, Yeah.
So hard to make the right decisions.
It is, yeah. But as I say, it definitely toughened me up, and I think I wouldn't take any of it back. It was an experience.
Things looked up though, didn't they? I mean, 4 years later, and you were back, a new team, but back with Lawrie Smith on board the Silk Cut. How did that all go down?
Well, again, it's complicated again, because actually what happened is Magnus got the money for EF, and I remember I was renting a little house just in the outskirts of Lymington. I was still desperate to do around the world. The same thing. I was writing to everyone, Grant, Chris Dixon, again, all the same people. Have you got a spot for me? And then Magnus phoned me. I can remember what I was doing. The phone rang. I picked it up, and it was Magnus. He said, "Jason, come to Stockholm. I've got the money. We're going to do the round the world race, and I want you to join me. Come on!" And so off I went. Got on the plane. Went to Magnus. I can see Magnus there picking me up at the airport. Took me to the offices of EF. It was like a dream come true. And this was very early. We were the first campaign announced. It was a 2-boat. All-girl crew and a guy crew, and I was the first one there. I hadn't been given a contract for the race yet, and then I think there were 5 guys who were brought in early. I was the first one, Klabanilov, Jan Decker, and then at that time the reason they wouldn't give us any of us a job, is they didn't have the skipper signed up, and they were trying to get Lawrie. And I think Lawrie really wanted his own British thing, but it wasn't happening. So eventually Lawrie signed up to it. And then when Lawrie signed up to it, at this point we were in Marstrand sail testing, again, the 2 boats, and people were coming in for crew trials. And it was very difficult because, I was there desperate to be on the boat. I still hadn't been given a job, and I was seeing these people come in who were my mates, really. James Stagg, who's a great mate of mine. And at the time we were both the sort of British bowman. I was like, what's Shag doing here? I love Shag, but it's my job, So it was a difficult time, and Neil McDonald was coming in. All these people were coming in, and they just wouldn't commit. And then Lawrie was given the skipper's role, and then after he got the role, the Silk Cut money came along. So then Lawrie said to me, "Oh, Jason, it looks like we're going to have money from a all British campaign." Stu Bannatyne was there, and Lawrie sort of picked the guys he wanted, and he said, "Jason, I want you to come with me." And Neil's coming, Stu's coming. We're not sure what Jan's going to do, so then that happened, and then as soon as that happened, and I went and saw Magnus. Said, "Magnus, what? I don't know what to do." And Magnus said, "No, you're coming with me. I've talked to Paul Cale was in at this stage, and he said, I've told Paul that Jason's got to come, Jan's got to come. And so then I had a choice. And I remember I came back to Lymington. Actually, I think I went and saw Rick. It was like, you know, from the saga of Interim, and it was back with Rick. And I was saying to Rick, what do I do? You know, it's Magnus and it's EF, and I know them all. I feel really at home there, but it's British, it's Lawrie. And anyway, I decided to go with Silk Cut. So that's how it came about, the Silk Cut thing. And then, of course, EF went on to win the race, and we didn't. But again, no real regrets. You know, it was one of those things. And Silk Cut we didn't win the race, but we had a fantastic crew. I still feel to this day of course I'm biased, but the man for man on that boat, the crew was incredible. You know, such a strong crew. So it was a good experience. We broke the world record, 24-hour world record. We had our moments for sure.
I think Lawrie could be pretty persuasive, couldn't he?
Yeah, Lawrie is persuasive, and there's just something about Lawrie. Whether it's sailing or whether it's here in the business, Lawrie has gravitas in spades. You know, he's a very impressive guy all round, and it's hard not to follow him.
That was another stellar fleet that year. I mean, looking back at some of those crew lists, Kenny Reid, Ed Baird, Doltz was back, Paul Caird, as you said, John Kostecki, Torben Grail, Chris Dixon. I mean, proper legends in our sport. I mean, the list is endless. I mean, how competitive was that edition?
I think it was competitive, but it was, I must say, EF, Paul came in and I think he just notched it up a bit. You know, he just brought a real professional side to it. And I think, again, I hope Laurie's not cross with me, but I think he just raised the game. He took it all so seriously. Everything about it, the fitness, the preparation, just everything was notched up. And so I think actually EF were a class act. Nobody was close to EF really in that race. They won the first leg into Cape Town. They had a horror show in the Southern Ocean where we were really strong because Laurie's wonderful in the Southern Ocean, and we had Neil and Stu and these Tim Powell, all these people. Where the Southern Ocean was we were king of the Southern Ocean at the time, and EF were lost in the Southern Ocean. They had Magnus, but other than that, they didn't really have the experience. They had all these inshore sailors, really. I think that's fair to say at the time. Paul and Kimo Worthington, Stevie Erickson, amazing sailors, but they hadn't really been offshore. So they learnt a lot in that second leg. I mean, they had a terrible time. I mean, they looked broken when they arrived back into Fremantle. And that was a very tough leg, I remember that. But from then on in, they just got better and better. Their sail program was really strong, and so it was really EF and then everyone else. That's how that particular event felt. Yeah.
What was sailing with Lawrie Smith like? I mean, he was in the team when I sailed at my very first Olympics, 92 in Barcelona. You know, I was the youngest member of the team. I won't forget it. And Lawrie was a bit of a challenge. I guess they'd call it banter now. Yeah. But, you know, 97 was his fourth Whitbread, I think. How did you find sailing with Lawrie Smith?
I don't know. I think, well, I mean, I love sailing with Lawrie. I love being around Lawrie. I think for that event, Silk Cut, we were, I don't want to say Lawrie wasn't on form, but we got some things wrong. We definitely got the sail program wrong. The crew we got right. Lawrie picked a fantastic crew. And I think Lawrie was not standing away, but I think he wanted us to get on with it, which was good. But at the same time, we were such a young crew. I felt like we needed more, you know, we needed looking after and kind of a bit more direction because we were all so new to it. So if we'd had a bit more, if we'd all done it before, I think we would have been off and gone and we could have made some of those key decisions. But some of the key decisions that were made early were they put an end to any real chance of winning the race. I think when we started the race, we were not going to win the race. The sail program was wrong. That was the main thing. The sail program was wrong. But nevertheless, sailing with Lawrie was wonderful. I mean, I remember my first sort of glimpse of the Southern Ocean, and for sure, I've never been with anyone who sails so hard in the Southern Ocean. You know, I remember we had to spin. I was on the handles on deck. Everyone smoked on Silk Cut. There's a little glow of sort of orange all around deck, and I was grinding, and we had the chute out. It's like 40 knots of wind, fractional chute, just barreling downwind, fully stacked on the side of the boat. And I just thought, this is crazy. And Lawrie was in the hatch just smoking like this. So he used to sit like that with his legs up. And I looked at Lawrie and I said, this is crazy. And Lawrie just said, this is when you make the miles. And he was right, and we always did. With that crew we had in those conditions, that heavy downwind stuff, Neil McDonald, Tim Powell, Stuart Bannatyne, Gordon Maguire, Adrian Stead. I mean, it was Jez Fanstone. They were all so good. We never had a weak helmsman. We just were, we were on fire the whole time. And you as a bowman, you want to trust those guys that are behind you when you're going to set the Martin breaker, which fires off the spinnaker if you get in trouble. All these sort of things, you need to trust the guys. And for sure, I've never been on a boat where I had so much faith in the crew. They were so strong, man for man, brilliant. Yeah, that was good. And Lawrie picked that crew, so yeah.
Let's talk a bit more about the Southern Ocean leg. I mean, it was another incident-packed leg for Silk Cut. You had a run-in with an iceberg, I think, and then lost half the mast.
Yes.
I mean, what are your memories of that?
Of that particular leg, or just the race? Well, that was the leg to round the Horn. So that was, we'd by that stage we felt a bit more. We'd come together a bit more, I think. We started that leg and we sorted the sails out a bit better, and we went out of New Zealand really well. Again, it was our conditions, heavy downwind. We took off. I think we were well ahead of or we were coming through the fleet, if you like, and it all felt like, wow, we're sorted, we're away. And then, we had this incident where we hit some ice and we tore some fibre off the boats were all Kevlar in those days, but we tore some fibre off the hull, and we barreled on. We didn't stop. I remember hanging over the side with a hacksaw, just chopping off this flailing bit of unidirectional Kevlar, and still we went. And then probably 2 days later, the top of the rig, we broke something on the top of the rig, the fitting that holds the backstays, and the mast came tumbling down. So again, it was just like, we're just going, and then very, very depressing, and a long old slog to get round the Horn and back up. So we ended up back in Ushuaia actually, and then did a jury rig. Some of us flew up to Brazil to prepare the new rig, and the other guys sailed the boat up. So it was a big disappointment, having felt like we were really on our way. But after that, we really were. I think from Brazil on, we were top boat actually. We were too far behind EF to challenge them, but we were from Brazil onwards. We got the most points, I think. Yeah. We won the leg into Miami. We were second across the Atlantic, so it got better. It's not really enough just to be really good at one thing, just to be a bowman. By the time we got it off, we could hardly see the fleet. By the following morning, we'd passed every boat. It was windy, rough, cold, wild. And through the Southern Ocean, we just nailed it.
So Jason, you were 2 Volvos down by then. What was the situation off the water? What was your involvement in boat building by that time?
Well, I was the boat captain on Silk Cut, and I'd been in. Lawrie had sent me down to that boat was built at McConaughey's in Australia. So he'd sent me down there with Albert Neil Graham to sort of finish off the build, if you like. So I was already doing quite a lot of boat, but I'd finished my apprenticeship, so I was, I kind of knew a bit more what I was doing. So I was always the bowman and the boat captain, so I kind of looked after the boat, and I was getting more confident at that stage. And I think that's probably what Magnus saw as I mentioned earlier, I definitely had a weakness on the not being the dinghy sailor, but I had a big strength in knowing the boat, how they're put together. I think I had a good feel for when you can push the boat and when you can't push the boat. I still have that, and I mean, Neil's very good at that. Neil McDonald is very good at that. Lawrie was good at that, but even without that dinghy experience, I definitely felt more and more confident, and definitely was piping up more and more to say, guys, now's the time to back off, or there's a funny noise or something breaks, and I had the experience at that stage to say, that's fine, we're okay, don't worry, we can keep pressing on. And that's a big thing to bring to those campaigns, and I think it's something that's missed a lot. I think that's on a lot of around the world boats, that guy is not there, and you definitely lose out by not having that guy for sure. Yeah. So that's where the boat building side really strengthened my sailing side as well. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about Bill Green. You say you apprenticed with Green Marine in Lymington. He's American from San Francisco, no longer with us sadly, but he sounded like a real character. I mean, how well did you know Bill, and what impact would you say he had on your life?
Well, there's always people in your life that you look back at and think who really helped me and helped me go in a direction, and Bill was one of those for sure. He was a real character, real Californian. He was sort of wear a bandana, quite often with stars and stripes on it. And I remember in the boatyard at Undershore Road when I first started, he would mix the resin up and there'd be clouds of silica dust everywhere, resins going everywhere. But he'd get stuck in, he was great. Ian King would tell us where to put the fibre. It was a real team effort in those days. And he definitely, I think Bill he got me, he knew what I wanted to do, and he went all out to help me. He didn't have to. It was no benefit to him. I was just a guy there doing an apprenticeship, learning to build boats, but he knew I wanted to do that sailing, and he really did point me in the right direction, introduce me to the right people. Yeah, I became very close with Bill and was very sad when he passed away, yeah. And we built other, it was odd because I started off as an apprentice there at Green Marine at Undershore Road. And then we went back and we built Astor Abloy there with Bill Green, with me as the build manager. So it was almost a role reversal. It was very strange to be in there, kind of knowing all the guys building the boat. It was one. I really enjoyed it. But Bill made it very easy. It wasn't difficult to do. I went back in the door, but this time I was kind of the guy putting it all together. And then we went back again for Ericsson after that. So it was, I miss Bill, and he was a real legend, and another wonderful sailor too. Not just a good boat builder, but people forget that he was very much, of the day, Admiral's Cups, all that stuff. The bad fastnet race, he was very involved in that. He was a wonderful sailor, and a great character.
How important do you think having a real grounding in boat building was to your sailing career? I know you touched on it a little bit, but also vice versa. I mean, being such an accomplished sailor, when it comes to building boats, how important is it to have the two together?
I think it's very important to have the two together. And if I'm brutally honest, I don't think I ever would have gone around the world boat without my boat building. I just wouldn't have, I wouldn't have had that opportunity through Bill Green or, Edgar Cook above Magnus Olsen or whatever. But also that I don't think it's not enough just to be, particularly now, but even then, it's not really enough just to be really good at one thing, just to be a bowman, or just all I can do is trim a sail. I can't, or just helm. You now got to be able to do more than that. So obviously more sailing skills on the boat is good, but also, being a boat builder is a huge asset on a boat like that, where you're in the Southern Ocean and you're beating the boat up all the time, or a good sailmaker or a good rigger or whatever. So that, I think the two went hand in hand for sure. So I'm sure I wouldn't have got those opportunities without my boat building. Yeah.
Well, for the next edition, the Whitbread became the Volvo, and you were back on the crew list, this time with Asa Abloy. But you've been part, as you say, you were a big part of the boat build at Green's. I guess by now, it was new build techniques. How exciting was that, this new boat, and how did all that come about?
Well, at the time I was, it was never straightforward onto these Volvo boats or Whitbread boats. I was actually, at the time, I was sailing with Grant Dalton on Club Med. I joined them in, I think Neil had helped to get me on the boat there, and it was all for the race at the time. But at the same time, I was trying to get into the round the world, the Volvo race as it was then. So I was talking to Magnus, talking to Lawrie, talking to whoever, what might happen. I was with Grant. I got the offer to do the race with Grant, and then Magnus phoned me up and said, "Jason, I've got the money. We're off. Come on. I want you to join." And honestly, Shirley, at that point, I'm going. I'm not gonna. This time, I'm going and I'm staying. So, and Magnus said, "I want you to run the build. The whole build, how we build the boat. It's two boats. And it was just what I wanted to do. So I told Grant I was leaving, which wasn't easy. What goes around comes around, he said to me. But I came back. Again, we decided to build the boats at Green Marine, 2 boats. And we decided, I'd always felt it's strange, but in production boat building, all production boats are built in female moulds. Up until that time, generally, all custom race boats were built on male plugs because they're one-offs. It just didn't seem to make sense to invest in a female tool. But female tools, if they're done well, it's a big advantage because you have no filling and fairing, less paint. It's a much lighter boat. So I was really hitting that drum that we could really make a gain with the way we build the boat. And then that last generation of Whitbred 60, Volvo 60, any weight you saved in the boat, you put on the bulb. There's no limit. So if you save 300 kilos building the boat, you put 300 kilos on the bulb. So that's what we set about doing. And we were so into that. We looked everywhere for any gain. We used Giovanni Belgrano to review the structures. We put composite chain plates on the boat. I know that's very normal now, but at the time it wasn't. The boat came out of the mould and was just lacquered. And we were hundreds of kilos lighter than any other boat. And Acer Abloy, we didn't win the race. Ilbert won the race, but we were certainly the fastest boat. And there were times when it was staggering how fast we were, and it was purely bulb weight and stability. I remember it happened a lot of times, but probably one of the most memorable ones was the start out of La Rochelle, where we never got a good start. I shouldn't blame Neil for that, but we never got a good start. You can tell Neil this one. But we started, and we were started at the pin end, and we thought, gosh, we're off. Great start. What's happening? We just weren't really. We looked around. We had the pin end mark round the rudder. So I jumped in the water. Richard Mason jumps in the water, trying to get this buoy off. By the time we got it off, the whole fleet had gone, and it was a kind of blast reach up the French coast, up towards Ushant. By the time we got it off, we could hardly see the fleet. By the following morning, we'd passed every boat, just blast reaching, like half a knot faster. It was fantastic, and it was all bulb weight, and that was purely building a lighter boat and having a bigger bulb. So that was exciting, and the whole race was like that. We knew probably from halfway around the race, we had so much confidence in the boat and our boat speed. And again, we had a wonderful crew. Neil was a fantastic skipper, really brought the team together. Magnus Olsson was there. Yeah, in terms of a team and being on a crew, that will always be my highlight of just thinking, wow, what a wonderful experience. We didn't win, but I remember the Seahorse, the voting for Sailor of the Month. It was that month when after the race finished, it was John Kostecki or Neil McDonald, and Neil McDonald won it. And I thought, well, there's a reason for that. It was fantastic, wonderful.
And when you ask people about you, they always say, you're a real perfectionist, attention to detail. And I can imagine, if you have that mentality, to be in charge of building something which is cutting edge and then racing on it, it must be an extraordinary moment to pull all that together.
It was. I loved it, and it was a huge honour to be able to do it. I must admit, now as time goes by, and now particularly having the boatyard, I realised that I wasn't easy at all. I know, for me, the money was not I didn't care about the money. I didn't care what it cost to build the boat. I just wanted the best boat. And, we would, it cost quite a lot of money to build the female mould and lacquer the first boat. And then there was a discussion about the second boat. This is Acer Abloy of the 2 boats. And in my mind, the second boat would always be the race boat, because I just knew it would be just a little bit better than the first boat. It always is. So I was determined that the second boat was the race boat, and there was a discussion that actually it would be a lot. We'd save some money if we just painted the second boat. And this was Richard Breezius and Johan saying, "Well, why don't we paint it?" I said, "No, you can't paint it. That's going to add, a couple of kilos or something, whatever it was." And I just was like, "No, we will not."
Thumping the table.
Yeah, and in the end, I think Bill Green helped out on that. I think Bill said, "Look, let's reduce the hourly rate to make sure we can do the same thing." And even I remember we were also sponsored by Semcon, which was, they're a red company, if you like. They always had something red, and they wanted the coach roof to be red. And I caused such a fuss about why are we putting this paint on the boat? It's heavier, you know, we don't need that paint. And I'd worked out per square metre what that was going to weigh. And I said, no, we're not painting it red. I even phoned, I think it was, can't remember, it was Lars or Johan or whoever ran Semcon, and he literally phoned him up and said, what are you making us do, you know? But we're the sponsor, it's our colour. And I get all that now, but at the time, no, there was no compromise. It was, we've got to have the best boat, lightest boat.
I love that attention to detail. That's good. And you quickly glossed over the race, but tell us a little bit about what happened. I mean, didn't you start off with Roy Heiner as a skipper, and then there was Neil, and you know, tell us a little bit about how that flowed.
Well, it's always that particular Atlantocean Racing at the time, which was Richard Breedis, Johan, and Magnus. Their sort of model was often to find the money and then bring the guy in to skipper it, if you like. Whereas a lot of others, you know, if it's Grant or Lawrie, they'd just go out and find the money. So when I joined Sir Abloy, much like EF, there was no skipper at the time. I was the first one in there. We had no skipper. There was a lot of chat about who the skipper might be. You know, like Laurie's name was still floating around. Neil's wasn't, because Neil wasn't really known as a skipper at that time. Grant Dalton was in the mix, but Grant was doing Club Med. So it was funny, you know, you're sort of there, but you don't know who's going to be running the team, and it just feels a bit strange, and you're so involved because you're building the boat, making all these decisions. And then I remember Magnus saying to me, we think it's going to be Roy Heiner, and then Roy came over and we met Roy, and I don't know, I just didn't click with Roy. And to be fair, I don't think Roy clicked with me, and that's nothing, it just didn't feel right to me. And as I say, it was a mutual thing. I don't think he was a fan of mine either at the time. So that was a bit, I don't know, I was a bit disappointed by that. But anyway, we carried on. It wasn't, early days of Astrablo, it wasn't particularly happy families. We had a good crew, but we just, I don't know, it just wasn't, by that stage, I'd done a few races, and I felt like I kind of felt like I knew what was needed to win the race. Not in every way, but I had a lot of opinions on it. Rightly or wrongly, and I just felt it didn't feel right. I thought that we're not going to be competitive the way we're going like this. Anyway, we started the race, and Mark Rudiger was the navigator, wonderful chap. He's passed away now, but fantastic navigator, lovely guy. And he was kind of co-skipper with Roy, but it was just all a bit wishy-washy. We started very well. We were second place around Trinidad Island off Brazil, with Ilbrook, tucked in with Ilbrook, and then we made a big tactical blunder and ended up well back, and I think we were fifth or something into Cape Town, and there was pretty much, I don't think it's too strong to say, there was pretty much a mutiny. I think fortunately Magnus was on the boat too, so Magnus sort of saw everything, felt everything, and certainly a good chunk of the crew just said, we can't go on like this, it doesn't feel right. And I was a big fan of Neil McDonald. I thought Neil should be the skipper. I was saying that to Magnus for a long time, and I think Magnus was a huge fan of Neil McDonald's, you know. So that was a difficult time. There was a lot of, we all went in and saw Richard and Johan and talked about what we felt and what our experiences was. And it wasn't a malicious thing with Roy. It was just, it didn't work. It just wasn't working for whatever reason. So the decision was made to change to Neil for the next leg. Roy went, and I should just say, because we might not get there, I'm very aware that then later on Roy joined ABN AMRO, put that program together and won the race, so good on him for that. But we carried on with Neil. We did the second leg, and I think that for me, that was probably we didn't win that leg, but it's my favourite. If I think back to my ocean racing, that was my favourite leg ever, I think. It was windy, rough, cold, wild. And through the Southern Ocean, we just nailed it. We were really fast, really competitive. We unfortunately made another blunder coming up the coast just before at King Island, before the turn up to Sydney. But through the Southern Ocean, we were amazing. Great crew again. Neil, I just can't say enough good about Neil McDonald on offshore. Such a strong guy, you know, so solid, so this is what we're going to do, and just leads from the front, the whole, and that's what that crew needed. We needed a leader, and Neil would be on the helm if he needed to be on the helm for 12 hours in the Southern Ocean, he would be. His eyes were frozen, his hands are frozen, he'd just be barreling along, he was wonderful, and it just really brought the whole team together. And although we arrived in Sydney, I think we were very disappointed, but we definitely I think we all felt, wow, we're good, we're all right, the crew's all right, the boat's good, sail program was good, we're gonna be fine. And from then on, we just improved and improved. We won the Sydney Hobart, which was part of the thing. We then won into New Zealand. I think we won the next leg, and we were certainly on the last leg from Gothenburg to Kiel. We were in with a shout. We were only 4 points behind Ilbrook or something. So it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. I look back really fondly on that. And I remember the leg into. We sailed into Gothenburg. We had a really tight race with Taika. That was the one I was talking about, where we blast reach past everyone up the French coast. Then we sailed through the English Channel past Dover. We were tucked in, dragging the boom along the dock, trying to get out the tide with all the other boats. And then another fast spinnaker reach across the North Sea. And we came into Gothenburg literally alongside Tycho, when we beat them into Gothenburg by, I don't know, 1 minute and 30 seconds or something, and it was our home port. Oh, it was fantastic. And Magnus and Clubber were just a big part. It was the biggest party ever. It was fantastic. I remember we all had our oilskins on, and the following morning, after a big party, we all came back to the boat, and Neil Graham Albert he was our sort of shore manager, a fantastic guy. Everyone had reported back to the boat apart from Clubber. There was no sign of Clubber, and Clubber had gone home. We were living in these apartments just outside Gothenburg. They all kind of looked quite similar. He walked home. He went in. He got undressed, fell asleep on the sofa. I hope Clubber won't mind me telling this story. So completely naked. He's quite a good-looking guy, Clubber. There was a phone call to Albert at the shore base saying, do you have a crew member called Clubber Nieloff? Because his name was on the back of his oilskins, but he was naked in someone else's house. But we had a lot of fun on that campaign, and we were competitive for sure. And the boat was fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, you finished second. A great boat and a great team, and I guess amazing memories.
Fantastic memories. It was brilliant. All the guys, and we still keep in touch. It was really good. Yeah.
Well, during that time, Ellen MacArthur had been making some serious waves in offshore sailing, hadn't she? I mean, second place in the Vendée Globe in 2001. And by 2003, she bought Bruno Perron's catamaran Orange and assembled an all-star crew for an attempt at the Jules Verne Trophy. You were on the crew list. How did that come about?
I think they'd asked me originally to go and help refit the boat. It was Offshore Challenges. Again, Neil Graham was involved. I think Neil had asked me would I go, and at the time I remember this. I just finished Astrablo, and I was properly burnt out from Astrablo, and it was too early. I just needed a break. I think you don't hear that a lot, but it's very true that anyone who does a ocean race, full on, especially if you build the boat as well or are very involved with the whole putting it together, then you do the race, you just are worn out at the end of it. So I was just not ready to jump into something like that. So I said to Albert, look, Albert, I'd love to sail, but I'm not really up for the refit. And he said, fine. And anyway, so I joined a bit later, but as a sailor. And again, it was quite an easy fit because a lot of my mates were there. Neil McDonald was there, Guillermo was there. That was quite an easy slide in. A lot of the guys I knew, and Ellen was very, it was good to be sailing with Ellen. It was exciting, and I really liked the idea of the Jules Verne. I thought non-stop round the world. Wow, that's pretty good.
The boat was quick, wasn't it? It was the Jules Verne Trophy holder at the time. And how confident were you all that the record could be broken?
I think we were confident, but we were, as is often the problem, certainly then, is we were kind of up against the time frame, so that if you can just wait for the perfect weather window, then you're obviously in a lot better shape. But we kind of at that time we had a sort of deadline where we had to have gone. So we probably didn't leave on a perfect weather window. We left in a full-on storm. I remember that. I remember again Ushant going around there, and the Bay of Biscay was wild. Just getting out, we were very quick out. But then we had a slow period, so we were always kind of chasing it. But I think when we obviously broke the mast in the Southern Ocean, but when we broke the mast, we were ahead of the record. So I think we always felt we had a good go at it. Yeah.
What was it like sailing with Ellen?
Yeah, it was good. I mean, she very much a bit like Lawrie in a way. She kind of left us to it a little bit. We had a very strong crew, you know. And I think Neil was one watch leader. One of the French guys was the other watch leader, or maybe it was Guillermo. But it was a very strong crew, so she very much concentrated on the weather and the where we were going to go, putting the whole thing together. But in terms of sailing the boat, she kind of left the guys to it. Of course, she'd come up and helm and do her thing, but we were kind of left to it. But it was great. And I think right now people say, "Oh, do you miss the Volvo? Would you do the Volvo again?" I couldn't think of anything worse really. But I would be if someone said, "Oh, we're going to do a Jules Verne," I think I could be tempted. I'd still like the idea of doing it because I think it's such a fantastic. I like that it's non-stop. I like that you've got to keep the boat going. It's all exciting, and actually it's quite. I don't want to say it's easy, but the boats it's so easy for the boats to go fast, and it's not, and not having those other boats around you. I think with the ocean race, particularly in the races after I stopped competing, but I think that's so wearing when you've got the skeds and how we do it. That's just you don't have that. It's just a clock. It's quite nice.
Tim, who produces this podcast, was filming the whole build-up of the attempt for a BBC documentary, but actually on the boat was a good friend of ours. He gets a mention on the pod every once in a while. Andrew Priest was filming on board for the record attempt, and he remembers you diving headfirst into the boat building role, spending forever whilst already at sea fixing problems on the aft beam. I mean, there was damage also, I think, to the radar cover that you had to fix.
Yeah,
I mean, do you remember all of that? Was it just a case of keeping the wheels on?
Yeah, no, I do remember all that. And again, it's because it's something you're good at and you feel like you're contributing. Like it felt like it was the one sort of area I could really contribute and help maybe more than others. So I loved all that. We did smash the beam up, and I remember Neil being involved. We bolted the beam back together. I was inside the beam, and this was the aft beam, just got slammed. I was inside drilling holes, posting bolts through. Neil was on the outside putting the nuts on. So we did that. We caught a spinnaker sheet, went around one of the pedestals and broke the pedestal off. So I spent a few days fixing the making a new base and bolting that back together. And there was a lot of that going on. It was a lot of fun. And I remember using the I needed to get some beams to put in to support the aft beam. It was quite a big panel, so I wanted to make some little stringers, if you like, to support it. So I had to find these stringers from somewhere, and we had two toilets on the boat, one on the starboard hull, one on the port hull. And most of the French guys lived on the starboard hull, and most of the English guys lived on the port hull. And Guillermo had he'd written above on the starboard hull where you go in. He'd written Best Western, and on our side was the Hilton. So we lived in the Hilton, and all the frogs lived in the Best Western. And whenever we needed to use the loo, if you needed to poo, you all go to the Best Western, you see. So when we needed these panels, I thought, well, what am I going to? And Guillermo was like, oh, you've got to take the door off the Best Western. So we went and took the door off the toilet, and I chopped all that up and made it into little stringers and got in and bonded them all into the aft beam. So there were lots of, it was a really fun trip, that.
That's so funny.
we broke a lot of stuff, that's for sure.
I mean, the attempt was cut short, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Pushing
sadly.
hard in the Southern Ocean, and the mast let you down. Another broken mast, Jason. I mean, what are your memories of that?
Of the mast itself? Well, it was it was just the last thing. We'd had the beam damage. Sadly, I think we hit a whale and broke the starboard dagger board. So we'd taken quite a bit off the bottom of the dagger board. We'd broken this pedestal. We'd had a lot of damage. It's normal on those boats and that kind of race. That you talked about the Satcom dome. That happened on that first night actually. On the start, it was so windy. We just the waves were just coming over, and it just took the lid off the Satcom dome. remember Neil yelling down to us, "Oh, we've lost the rubbish bin. The rubbish bin's gone. Oh, the other one's gone." But actually Andrew Priest and I managed to get that thing working again. We made some little resistors out of carbon fibre, and it was really fun. So yeah, it's a real adventure, the Jules Verne, because you've got, you're supposed to finish, and it's trying to get to that point. Obviously the rig was one thing too much. We couldn't fix that. But I
mean, how was it? A broken mast, miles from anywhere, night time.
Yeah.
And it's not a given that you'll be okay in that kind of scenario.
No, it wasn't. And we were deep in the site. We were pretty much, I think we were close to Kerguelen. We were past Kerguelen Island, I think, might have been south of Kerguelen Island. We were a long way south. It was very windy, wild times. But once the rig was down and cleared up, there was no real day. I mean, it's a big, stable platform, these big multi-hulls. So it was just a long time to get into. I think we went into Fremantle. It was just a long old time. But again, very good crew who can sort it out. And the morale was all right. We kind of got going and got the boat in there.
Priesty told me about the chess league. He said you'd all fashioned a chess set. And then I was watching some Whitbred footage of Silk Cut and saw a very similar scenario. Is that a Carrington thing? Were you playing chess? Are you the Grand Master? I'm
so bad at I don't think I can play chess. I'd be doing drafts. But I do remember it. And I remember it on Silk Cut. And I remember I was so down. I hate to say it. After we broke the mast, I just was a bit broken, really. But I do remember the guys doing the playing chess, and I also remember that it's typical Lawrie. Before we got to Cape Horn, he was like, "Right, we need some guys to go up and prep the rig, and then some other guys to get the fuel on the boat and sail the boat up." And of course, nobody wanted to sail the boat with half a rig up to Brazil. So Lawrie said, "Okay, well, look, we'll draw straws." So he got a sort of, I don't know, cup, and he got something sticks or something wherever he got, and he cut them all, and then he held it like that, and he went, "Right, everyone draw straws." We all had to draw a straw. But actually, he said, "Jason, you don't need to draw a straw because we need you. You need to come and sort the rig out, and Neil, you need to come too. But it's the rest of you, so perfect for us." And we just really enjoyed watching this, and it was so funny because there were some people that were desperate to get to Brazil, including Gordon Maguire, who had Joe Guest there, his girlfriend at the time. So he was desperate to get to Brazil, and he pulled the shortest straw you've ever seen. There was a lot of chuckling going on. And I think Ado drew a short straw. It was very funny. And the rest of us we flew to Buenos Aires, had a big steak dinner, and then flew on up to Brazil to get the rig ready. And the boat arrived, the boat arrived just a few days before the start of the next leg. We had a very short time to get the rig in and get going. And then we won that leg, so it was good.
I hope you're all enjoying my chat with Jason Carrington, a great storyteller with a real enthusiasm for our sport. I spoke to several people that knew Jason before recording this podcast, and each and every one of them had nothing but warm words to say. Jason, thank you for your time. And to Jason's friends that fed into our research, also a big thank you. If you've enjoyed the pod and would like to support it, please do head over to buymeacoffee.com/sailing podcast. We work hard to bring you a real quality, ad-free listen. It's lovely to have your support, and many, many thanks for that. And thanks too to the talented Tim at Vertigo Films for producing these podcasts. Tim, thank you. Until next time, thank you so much for listening. Have fun on the water and sail safe, everyone.
This is Castle 1. Race officer speaking.
Late line is on boundary up ahead, 35 seconds out.
A bit lower and faster here.
Ho, ho, ho. That's a good one, Jimmy.
Still gaining on the lane line there.
We're looking at 10-5, 42. Matching him on the boundary, yeah. Copy.
This is Castle 1 standing by. Out.